All right, today we're diving into a really fascinating and honestly pretty radical idea in foreign policy, the Gujral Doctrine. In a region that's often defined by tension, India decided to try something completely different. Basically, an offer of unilateral goodwill. Let's get into how this bold strategy aimed to completely reshape South Asia.
So this is the big question, right? For a country with the size and power of India, how do you actually build bridges instead of walls? How do you convince your neighbors that your strength is a source of stability for everyone and not, a threat? This is the fundamental challenge that the Gujral Doctrine was created to solve.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the regional context. Then we'll jump into the doctrine itself and its 5 pillars. After that, we'll see what kind of impact it had. And finally, trace its legacy right up to today.
First things first, we have to understand the landscape. To really get why the Gujral Doctrine was so groundbreaking, you have to appreciate the geopolitical climate of South Asia back then, which, to put it mildly, was often marked by some pretty deep-seated distrust. Think about it. India's sheer size and scale creates this inherent power imbalance with its neighbors, countries like Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. It's a really delicate dynamic, where any action, even a gesture of friendship, could easily be misinterpreted as some kind of power play.
So, with that tricky situation as the backdrop, how did India tackle this? Well, that brings us right to the doctrine itself, a totally innovative offer of goodwill that was designed to break that very cycle of suspicion.
So, back in the late 1990s, Prime Minister I.K. Gujral came up with this idea, and it was simple but pretty profound. India would offer help and concessions to its smaller neighbors unilaterally. And here's the key, the part that was truly radical. It was non-reciprocal. No strings attached.
The best way to think about it is just being a good neighbor. You're not keeping a scorecard of who did what for whom. You act out of goodwill because it's the right thing to do, not because you're expecting a transaction. India basically decided to give first, without demanding anything back, hoping it would totally reset the tone of the entire region.
Now, this whole goodwill philosophy wasn't just some vague, feel-good idea. Nope, it was a concrete strategy with 5 very clear pillars. So let's look at the practical how-to of the doctrine. The whole strategy was really built on these 5 connected goals. It all started with promoting stability and improving diplomatic ties through these goodwill gestures. The idea was that this would create the right kind of atmosphere to then resolve conflicts through dialogue. And the ultimate aim? Well, it was to strengthen India's image as a responsible leader and build a lasting foundation of real trust for the future.
Okay, so the big question, did it actually work? Let's take a look at the real-world impact of this doctrine. Because this wasn't just theory, It marked a huge, tangible shift in how India did diplomacy, moving away from a posture of, potential coercion to one of active cooperation. And wow, the shift was pretty dramatic. The old dynamic was all about mutual distrust, which led to stalled agreements and just constant tension. But by leading with trust, the doctrine opened up brand new avenues for dialogue. A perfect example is the 1996 Ganga Water Treaty with Bangladesh. This thing had been a source of dispute for decades, and it got resolved because India offered more generous terms without demanding tit-for-tat concessions. This phrase just sums it all up perfectly. Cooperation rather than coercion. It was a deliberate choice to use India's size not as a threat, not as leverage, but as an anchor for the whole region's stability and support.
And you could really see the results. The doctrine boosted India's soft power and improved its image as a partner you could work with. It led to greater regional stability, and, like we saw with the Ganga Treaty, it was crucial in breaking the logjam on diplomatic issues that have been stuck for years.
But look, this wasn't just some flash-in-the-pan policy that came and went. The principles of the Gujral Doctrine have cast a really long shadow, creating a lasting legacy that continues to influence Indian foreign policy even today. You can draw a straight line from the Gujral Doctrine in the 90s to India's modern neighborhood-first policy. That core idea of prioritizing positive, trust-based relationships, that's the direct inheritance of Gujral's vision.
So even now, decades later, the Gujral Doctrine is still a vital reference point in diplomacy. It's a powerful reminder that even in the high-stakes world of geopolitics, sometimes the smartest, most effective strategy is a simple, proactive act of goodwill. All right, let's recap the big takeaways. The Gujral Doctrine was a really bold policy of unilateral, no-strings-attached goodwill. It was all about building trust with smaller neighbors.
It successfully managed to reframe India's image from a potential giant to a proven cooperative partner, and its core principles are still shaping Indian diplomacy today.
And that leaves us with a big question for today's world, doesn't it? In an era that's so often dominated by competition and hard-nosed national interest, can a policy that's rooted in radical goodwill still be a real, viable tool for shaping how nations get along? It's a powerful question to think about. Thanks for joining this explainer.